Hello once again. I am Mike, bringing to you probably my last video for a while on this concept, mock Spanish. I'm going to do an article today by a scholar named Jennifer Roth-Gordon, who I think raises some fantastic concerns with Jane Hill's work. Which I feel needs to be addressed a little bit more often by scholars. Mainly that the category white is also a racializing category that could be potentially just as fragile as other subordinated racializing categories. So we speak of racialization more or less following Urcioli's definitions of racialization and ethnicization. So, an ethnic group, like a model minority Asian American, this is seen as an ethnicity because they are safe to American whiteness. So, that's an ethnicity. While racialization is a process done to groups that are seen as dangerous to American whiteness. For example, Mexicans who are lazy that have too many babies. This makes them dangerous, or this makes them a dangerous race to America in general. So, race dangerous, ethnicity safe. But whiteness is created and sustained too. Whiteness is a race category with its own forms of racialization that does not denigrate, but instead elevates. So, how do we talk about this kind of racialization, a converse racialization? Roth-Gordon doesn't use this term, that's just me saying that. So, for example, a converse proposition flips something that then becomes questionable or maybe even not true. For example, if it is raining outside, then the grass is wet. So, the converse of this statement would be, if the grass is wet, then it is raining. So the second one could potentially be false, right? Because you could have just watered your lawn or something. So I think we have the same problem with the way we treat race. So if a group is perceived as dangerous, then it is race. But the converse, if it is race, then it is dangerous. That is not necessarily true for the category white or the white race. So it's a converse racialization. So converse racialization is just my way of saying that there will be exceptions all over the place. And these exceptions are by no means exceptional. They just happen in everyday life, just the way racialization happens in everyday life with any other racialized and minoritized group. So, Roth-Gordon does this great thing where they more directly connect linguistic practice to the body, which I think adds a degree of materiality to the voice that is often missing in these studies. In the subsection titled Race and the Undisciplined Body, at a basic level, Roth-Gordon conceptualizes whiteness not as this giant, unstoppable, uniform mass, but as potentially a racialized population from within that does its own form of racialization. That is, having its own internal divisions, where bodies and behavior meet things like class and color and race categories. So the category poor white trash, like other populations, can be racially improved, albeit in converse ways. For example, a hillbilly register of English, which could be registered as hyper white to a non white crowd, would be registered as a kind of failed whiteness by an elite white person. So, disciplining your body, which has a voice, to represent a particular kind of legitimate whiteness is present within the white community itself. So this article presents a lot of examples about the disciplining of language use through the law or like language policy, for example. That's the subsection linguistic display of discipline. It's pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to cover that stuff here. But the body will influence our perception of speakers. I talk about this in part 1 of my series on Jane Hill's book, where we not only see race, but we hear race, and we also even read race into text. So check that out if you are interested in going down that line of thinking. So the next section on the potential losing of whiteness, I think shows how whiteness as a converse racialization must also be protected. It isn't something that exists as naturally as we might imagine. For example, protecting white children from a Spanish-speaking house cleaner, not because people are directly and consciously thinking that the house cleaner is racially inferior, although I'm sure that happens a lot of times, but because the parent believes the whiteness of their children could possibly be at risk if they use Spanish, which only indirectly points to Spanish speakers as inferior. Now, these are active decisions to protect whiteness. You can't get so cozy with Spanish speakers, or the Spanish language for that matter. She also invokes Rusty Barrett's work. So the guy works at a restaurant. He's like the bartender or something, and hangs out with the Spanish-speaking back of the house, like the cooks and those people. He invites them to a restaurant hangout at the white manager's house. From that point, Barrett is not invited to hangouts anymore. So he loses the privileges of whiteness in this moment. He is too involved with Spanish speakers. So the racism here was directed at another white person for not following the understood rules of who gets invited to these parties. So whiteness is an active project, just like any other race. Even white people can be ostracized. And in the next section, Roth-Gordon talks about Conan O'Brien and Martha Stewart eating Taco Bell and drinking 40s of malt liquor. Roth-Gordon calls this a racial shift out of whiteness. It's quick. It happens in real time. It's a kind of flirting with non-whiteness. The meanings generated through comedy, though, are so unpredictable. So yes, they index coolness and relaxedness of Conan and Stewart. But also, this could be interpreted as a meta-commentary of what is not normal behavior for whiteness. Or rather, is this elevating a particular kind of legitimate whiteness over other kinds of whiteness and racialized populations? Possibly. People can understand this in a whole lot of ways. Another fascinating case study is the shift in and out of whiteness when visiting this particular Mexican restaurant that has all these Mexican stereotypes all over the place. This is in one of the last sections of the article. Now, in this space, Stereotypes are deployed everywhere and requires customers to know Spanish. This is pretty interesting. I wish she had put a picture of the menu because I'm really interested in what kinds of Spanish uh, was happening here, and if there were like translations underneath the Spanish words, because something unique always happens with food Spanish. And I go to these kinds of restaurants kind of on purpose because they thoroughly confuse me. So overall, I think this is just an awesome contribution to critical whiteness studies, and we need more stuff like this. Whiteness is not this unstoppable blob. Whiteness adapts and maintains itself. It keeps itself in an elevated position in ways primarily indirect. But within the white community, there are also divisions and forms of discipline crucial to maintaining this position. Now, we already know about all the divisions between racialized populations imposed from outside and from within. But less attention is paid to the divisions within whiteness, or at least by white scholars. There is even less of an effort to impose these differentiations from the outside, to impose differences onto white communities, which may or may not be a useful strategy. I have to think about that a lot more before attempting or going down that route. But I think it's something really interesting, and I think this article is probably one of my favorites. One of my favorite responses to Jane Hill's work. So that's it for today. I am Mike. I'll see you very soon for more stuff on whatever I decide to talk about next time. I'll see you around.